my name is Jacqueline Michelle Norris, and this is my Module 9 case study for when ethics and policies collide for EDL 855. In Section 1, we're going to have a case summary and some facts established. First, we'll discuss who is involved in the case study. Richard Eyman is a first-year vice principal. There was a fifth period teacher, and there is James, a frequently tardy, toughest of the bunch, tattooed 15-year-old, undisputed leader of the group, student that turns out brought a weapon to school. David is the other student who is in honors classes, standout trombonist with a future, dreams, and potential. The school police officer escorted David to the office. And lastly, there's a director of secondary ed. Next, let's find out what's going on in this case study. 2 students were arrested for possession of brass knuckles, a felony, and mandated 45-day alternative program. The vice principal refuses to sign the expulsion papers for one of the students because he believes the student was coerced into accepting the weapon. The director is threatening an official reprimand should the vice principal refuse to sign expulsion papers for both students. Finally, when and where include at the start of the spring semester with the first-year vice principal at Rocket Junior High School during 5th period. Before beginning, terms throughout the presentation highlighted in yellow indicate words and phrases associated with the NELP standard. To begin this section, there are plenty of legal issues in the case. The 5th period teacher witnessed James, quote, James giving something to another student in the hall, end quote. The school employee must have specific observation. The teacher only said she saw something being passed. Something is not specific and therefore does not meet the reasonable suspicion criteria according to Nevada state law. There are laws governing the Fourth Amendment that are gray when it comes to school settings. According to one source, a resource officer may search a student based on any general suspicion and may then search the student based on how they act during their responses. Since David was, quote, shaking, crying, and refusing to speak, according to one resource, the officer was within the law. However, according to another article, officers may only conduct a search without reasonable suspicion if the student gives consent. The officer arresting David and James is not in violation of the law, as the school has a zero tolerance policy and the school is within its boundaries by placing both the student who has been expelled for 45 days into an alternative school system. The legal issues include James admitting to plan and use the brass knuckles on someone after school. This is against the law and may carry a heavier sentence for the intent and premeditation of harming another person. Additionally, James also admitted to coercing David when he said, quote, I told him I would kick his A double asterisk if he didn't hold the knucks for me. According to my district policy, a student who intimidates others is subject to expulsion. Going on, another legal issue includes brass knuckles on school property. Across the U.S., these are felony offenses. Continuing, there are ethical issues as well. The teacher observation did not meet the requirements of reasonable suspicion. It is ethically wrong to accuse students of drugs or other illegal activities based on what one didn't see clearly. At the least, she is a bit presumptive here, based on James's appearance and prior behavior. If the VP had asked what specifically she saw being passed, the teacher would not answer with fidelity. It does not say that James is a member of a protected class, so we are in the dark regarding any possible discrimination. To continue, the questioning of David included an ethical component because the student may have been emotionally harmed by being questioned by the principal in the presence of the officer. David had never been through such a thing as he is a model student in good academic and behavioral standing. Because of his emotional component, it may have been ethically wrong for the officer to search David without his permission. Additionally, there may be cause for concern if the resource officer's actions are discriminatory based on David Ramos's possible protected class. Furthermore, David's mother was offered no help as suitable answer for why her son was in trouble if another student admitted for forcing her son to hold a weapon. This violates the trust parents place in schools for being safe places to send their children. What's more, ethically and legally, there is a breach of contract here in this terrible situation. Policies that are unethical because they harm rather than protect students are unethical. These policies need to be questioned and scrutinized. At the very least, there should be a case-by-case review and judgment made within the spirit of the law. Legal structure is meant to protect victims, and our student David is a victim of bullying, coercion, and possible Fourth Amendment violations. Lastly, as to the VP's official reprimand, should he not expel David, that is also unethical. Mr. Unman, the VP, is protecting David. If David is expelled and sent to the alternative ed program, he will be stripped of his future and destroy him. Mr. Inman has a duty to protect students, and is by not expelling him, he fulfills that duty. If he caves in, he will violate his oath to protect and serve the best interests of students. Equally important, Section 3, which is really just a simple sentence that sums up the whole case in one sentence. Mr. Inman is faced with a no-win situation when he must choose between 1. Signing the expulsion papers for a student who, according to the zero tolerance policy, possessed brass knuckles for a short time because of his inability to deal with a bully who had coerced him into holding them, and 2. Receiving a disciplinary letter on his permanent file for refusing to expel the bullied student. To continue to Section 4, the synthesis of the facts is an important situation. The fifth period teacher has a duty to provide reasonable suspicion, not wild guesses. Mr. Inman has a duty to protect the students. He did not act in the best interest of the students in his method of questioning. The officer may have overreached his duty by questioning and searching the student. At the beginning of the case study, we find out that this takes place at Rocket Junior High School. James is from the South Side, and the case study indicates this is a rougher part of town, and James himself is described as heavily tattooed, tough, and a leader and fighter. David Ramos is described as an honor student, small boy, who plays the trombone in the band. We later find out that this case study takes place in a public school, at a middle school, secondary, with a student body of over 900. A principal and vice principal oversee the school, with the director of secondary education as supervisor. From this point, we're going to review and prioritize information. Parents will find the situation damaging. They send their children to school to be safe, and their child runs the risk of being victimized because he cannot stand up against the bigger, older, adult-looking bully. Administrators will find this damaging to their jobs as they are seen as uncaring for what is ethically correct. The directors will also lose standing as they will be seen as unbending and unaware of all the circumstances, not taking responsibility for the individual cases. The whole community suffers because of zero tolerance, an unattainable position. It can't be adhered to because there may not be a single thing in our lives that is held to a zero tolerance policy, not even killing another human being. For example, war is an exception to killing, and self-defense is another exception to killing. The district is the same. By not taking individual special circumstances in consideration, we disservice children. At best, the district is seen as unfeeling, and that group that blankets disciplines, even when there is a clear admission of guilt and a record of reliable attributes to back up the character of students. Section 5, I really need to learn more about the interrogation and parent notification. For instance, in my district, it's very clear that before students are interrogated, the parents should be notified as soon as possible and whenever possible prior to investigation. The second thing is practicing giving a student a chance to surrender the item before you pat them down or have the officer pat them down. Section 5, continuing, there are questions that need to be contemplated. What is the influence of James on the other children? Does James' slight chance of improved life supplant David's highly promising college career? Does zero tolerance policy overreach its legal authority? Policies that are unethical and harm rather than protect need to be questioned and scrutinized under the law. The legal structure is meant to protect victims. In this case, ethically, the victim is David. To prove a point, Section 6 provides an easily visual, simplistic view of the decision-making tree. Here we have the yes side to expel David. Here we have the no side to expel David. Section 6 continues with strategies to avoid the collision of ethics and law. However, I'd like to use a free pass to go back in time. I would like to, number 1, become Mr. Inman and go back in time and step in right after I've called to speak with James and right after the 5th period teacher called to report her suspicions. My strategies will include encouraging a rapport between the resource officer and students. At my school now, the resource officer may play football with students during recess or walk his drug dog at recess and talk with students. When he talks with them, he speaks honestly, tells them he's there for their safety. If they know something, they tell him, and he's able to keep everyone safe. As a principal, as Mr. Inman, I would definitely encourage this rapport and have the resource officer approachable and firm. Next, before I called the officer, I would walk down to the classroom myself. I'd ask the teacher why she felt drugs were involved. The 5th period teacher has a big nothing burger and caused the whole train of events to spiral out of control. She suspected drugs? Why? Was there slurred speech, bloodshot eyes, swaying posture, other behavior suggested drugs? Is he suggesting that of course it's drugs because James is from the South Side and his clothes indicate drug dealer or user? Then I would speak with David. I'd give him an opportunity to let me know what's going on. Chances are if I have a good relationship with my student body, David is going to know I have his best interest at heart and confide in me to get rid of that horrible weapon. Then I can get on with the business of keeping the school safe. Later, I'm going to encourage David to face his fears of saying no to someone stronger, to the school resource officer, and willing team of teachers to offer after-school club of standing up the right way to bullies. Lastly, as long as I've done all that preliminary work of building the trusting relationships, then in the meeting with students and the officer, I would have asked to pause the meeting. Then I would have discussed and relied on my school officer for his ability to interpret situations and make sure we were acting in the best interest of students and within the law. we probably would have come to the conclusion that David needed an opportunity to speak his side without fear, intimidation, or emotional duress. Section 7 is to evaluate options. So my 4 options. So developing a rapport between the resource officer and students, this really changed the students' mindset, and it sees the officers as willing adults willing to protect and help them. A con is it takes time, and if you don't already have a rapport with your resource officer, you have to make one to make him make a rapport with the student, so that can be time consuming. As to the decision to ask the teacher why she felt drugs were involved, this is just an opportunity to develop that skill of tact and grace. A con is the teacher might become very defensive, maybe assertive. The decision to get David my cell phone walk down, this does 2 things. One, it allows me to make sure that David isn't given a chance to dump whatever he's holding, and to keep developing a positive and trusting relationship with students. Cons, there are none. This is the most important thing on my plate right now. Other work was going to stay there until I'm done. The last one, to pause the meeting. So the pro for this is it makes sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that all procedure and due process is being followed to the letter. Make sure that you and the officer are aware of all the nuances as to what has happened. And a con is the officer might be offended. However, if I've gone ahead and made a professional relationship of trust and respect, it's unlikely. This is my favorite slide. So let's say I do decide as vice principal not to expel David, and I accept for ethical reasons that I will take the letter of discipline on my record because I know that's the upstanding thing to do. I will be honest and transparent with the director and accept the disciplinary decision. However, I will also let him know I plan to speak with the school board regarding their zero tolerance policy and how it failed our student body. In this way, I will advocate for ethical and legal decisions. I will promote how it might be in the best interest of each and every student to be treated as an individual with a story and consideration. This does not mean that decisions are subjective and we should play favorites. It simply means we consider that blanket policies do not define our district, its stakeholders, or the community. After a time, the community is inspired to begin the DARE program that they canceled due to funding, and several students have organized a Weapons Awareness Watch program, or WAP, where anyone may report anonymously. Family firearm safety classes and Second Amendment educational nights are offered at the local sheriff's department to deter fear and embrace responsibility. Family and parenting classes crop up, and students and teachers create pamphlets that include easy recipes and possible mealtime conversation topics. The local martial arts business gives the free Prevent Bullying classes where you can learn to fight so you don't have to fight. Churches are offering homework help for youth every Tuesday and Thursday after school. Regarding the letter on my file, well, that may be removed in 36 months when I write a professional, respectful, please remove from my file letter. To sum up this best option, I'll put it this way. There's always a way to behave gracefully, with dignity and respect. There's a way to move slowly and carefully when you're unaware, and I would, as a first-year vice principal, always involve another professional or create a quick decision tree whenever I'm unsure in a situation. Section 9. To begin on the new path after implementing my decision of no suspension for David, I'm going to need to speak respectfully with the director because he deserves my transparency in this matter. I will professionally accept the consequences of going against his directives. I will then inform him respectfully of my decision to speak with the school board regarding the policy since he was sympathetic during my explanation. Soon after, I will need to research and put together an outstanding digital presentation of the existing zero tolerance policy and how it may be failing for our students. I would like to work with the school resource officer to propose a procedure for step-by-step evaluation on a case-by-case basis that is objective and fair. What may happen is that the board agrees and the policy is modified. The worst-case scenario is a failure of my plan. This means the board rejects my proposal, the letter leads to further disciplinary action, David is expelled, he becomes a weapons fall guy for James, the weapons dealer, ends up getting killed because he never learned to deal with coercion and bullying. Wait, that's too far. In all seriousness, if this plan fails, I'm probably out of a job. To quote Jordan Peterson, competence is acceptance of vulnerability. I know I've done the right thing ethically, but I also know this could wreck my career. I'll accept that. To quote Dumbledore, I mean J.K. Rowling, there will be a time when we must choose between what is easy and what is right. These are the NELP standards we have addressed. References. Bonus slide. Ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, which means character. Policy comes from the Greek politia, which means administration. This case study challenged me. Time management is difficult with a full-time job, 3 children, and difficult with an even understanding husband who cooks the best dang steak and potatoes ever. Additionally, I had to truly contemplate if I